but hi everyone. Happy 2025. Thank you so much for joining today's Connecting for Better Health meeting. Before we start, just want to quickly acknowledge the devastating fires so many of us are currently experiencing in Los Angeles. Our hearts are with all of those impacted and suffering right now from the entire team. And, we know that destruction at this scale will require so much help and so many of us coming together in new ways for weeks, months, and potentially even longer after this. So we'll definitely have a smaller group on today. We know many of our C4BH members are involved in rapid response, but appreciate those of you joining today. Hope you all had a wonderful new year and a happy holidays. And we're really looking forward to more work together in 2025. We can go to the next slide. I think we have a few new faces on today. If you've never joined a Connecting for Better Health meeting before, welcome. We're so glad to have you here. Our coalition vision is that every Californian and their care teams have the information and insights they need to make care seamless, high quality, and affordable. At the end of 2024, all of you helped us set our policy priorities for this next year through discussions, survey, and a lot of input on what's most important for us to focus our work around. So as we look towards 2025, our priorities are 1, establishing DXF governance and accountability, 2, identifying dedicated and sustained funding streams, 3, strengthening social services data sharing, and 4, advancing high quality and actionable data sharing. As always, we really encourage folks to introduce yourself in the chat. Please, if you're able to, share your name, role, organization. Encourage you to connect with those who you might want to work with as part of this coalition. Next slide. We have a great agenda for today. We're going to hear a quick introduction from some friends at the Digital Medicine Society about a new project related to diabetes management. We have Jen DeAngelis on from Washington, D.C. to provide a whole host of federal updates. There's so much going on in D.C. right now and over the last few weeks, really looking forward to getting that deep dive from Jen. We'll continue with our California DXF and other policy-related updates, including some recent CalAIM-related updates that many of you likely saw. We'll talk a little bit about our 2025 legislation tracking and our upcoming events in March that are hopefully on all of your calendars. But I think with that, we can go ahead and get started. Olivia, I'll hand it over to you to introduce our first guest speaker.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. We're really excited to have Sarah Valentine here with us today to share more about the Digital Medicine Society and their work creating a digital measurement collaborative community, which is an upcoming opportunity that the C4BH team will be participating in later this spring. The Digital Medicine Society, DIME, is a global nonprofit and professional home for digital medicine. They are really focused on driving broad adoption of digital approaches to advance medicine to enhance public health. So I'll turn it over to Sarah to let you share a little bit more about your organization and this upcoming work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Olivia. It's a pleasure to meet all of you. As Olivia mentioned, my name is Sarah Valentine. I lead our partnerships across life sciences at the Digital Medicine Society, or DIME. I think Olivia gave a nice introduction. We are a global nonprofit. Our bread and butter is really bringing together pre-competitive collaborations. And what I mean by that is there are so many challenges that we face in the field of healthcare that, as you all know, are impossible for any single organization or entity to solve on their own. This is such an inherently cross-functional space. And in order to come up with the best solutions to optimize the way that we're caring for patients, we really need all hands on deck. And that means pharmaceutical companies, med tech, large tech organizations, health tech startups and innovators, hospital systems, health systems, payers, regulators, patient advocacy groups. And so what we generally do is we bring together these different organizations to think through what are some of the best practices, how can we overcome the challenges as it relates to implementing digital medicine in order to advance the safe, effective, and equitable use of these products in order to drive research in care. And so our work really spans digitally enabled healthcare, digital health products, digital health regulations, and digital health measurement. So this upcoming project that we're so excited about is really going to fall within our digital measures portfolio of work. It will fall under the Digital Health Measurement Collaborative Community, which is a very hard one acronym for DATA-CC. So DATA-CC, we host in partnership with our colleagues at FDA's Center for Devices in Radiological Health, or CDRH. And so this will be an effort that falls under that broader initiative. One of the things that is a priority for our colleagues at the agency is driving the use of digitally enabled measures, things like time and range, in order to really inform the way that we're caring for patients with diabetes. As you all likely know, right, diabetes is a chronic condition. It's incredibly comorbid, and it's incredibly prevalent within the United States. We do have technologies within this space. You hear so much about continuous glucose monitors and automated insulin delivery systems and these types of things, but we haven't really seen broad adoption, and specifically we really haven't seen that much equitable adoption and access to these new technologies in order to inform care. We believe that there is an opportunity to align on an approach to leveraging these new products in order to inform and optimize treatment and coverage decisions in order to improve access and maximize the value of care management within this space. And so our upcoming project will address many of those challenges. So through the upcoming project, our goal is to create a series of resources, one being a stakeholder alignment plan, 2 being an evidence framework, 3 being a patient-centered outcomes brief, and 4 being implementation pathways in order to support the use of these technologies in care management, in the various pathways in care settings, in order to really inform the way that we're managing diabetes. And so as we're gearing up for this project to launch in March of 2025, we would love to extend a warm invitation to any of you who are working within this space. Again, this is a challenge that really does need all hands on deck, and we'd love to partner with you in the upcoming project. So I'm going to put a link in the chat where you can learn a little bit more information about the project. Oh, it looks like Olivia's already done that for me. So if you click the link that Olivia shared, you'll be able to see more about this upcoming project. You can share kind of your contact info, and our team will be in touch to share a little bit more details around this specific project. But we are so thrilled to be partnering with Connecting for Better Health for this effort. And truly, we think that by coming together in order to think collectively about the challenges that we're facing with diabetes, we'll be able to come with a better solution and accelerate the actual realization of the promise and the value of these technologies within that space. So please share your interest. I'll also go ahead and I'll put my email in the chat as well. Feel free to contact me directly if you have any questions about the project itself. But hopefully that gives you a nice overview. Let me know if there are any questions, but looking forward to hopefully working with some of you on this work.
Sarah, I'm so excited that we get the opportunity to partner with you, and for everybody on the call. When we first met, the folks, the great team at Dyme, it seemed like we were following in their amazing footsteps with our approach and methodology around our sandbox, and being able to have very specific use cases to drive usability, and then be able to open that up for the community with the hopes to be able to accelerate adoption. And they've been doing this at a global level and with incredible partners. And I think what we can do is learn and then be able to bring that back to California and be able to put it into practice. So that's the hope, and we're going to be tagging along on this journey together. Sarah, do you want to just give a sense of what the commitment would be if you do raise your hand to be part of this project?
Yeah, absolutely. And so the way that these projects generally work, right, we do have kind of a scope of work that is outlined in a full project proposal. So if you fill out the form or if you contact me directly, I'd be happy to share that proposal with you. It'll talk through the challenge that we're trying to overcome, the specific deliverables that we're developing, some additional information about the timeline for when we plan to accomplish, all of the work that's scoped out. Along with kind of information about the expected contribution from what we call our project partners. Each of the projects that we run at Dime is very a la carte. So we don't have a membership. We instead kind of have participation from different organizations at a project by project level. Generally, what that looks like is from a time perspective, it's around 2 to 4 hours per month per organization throughout the duration of the project. This project in particular, we are planning for 9 months. We always like to say that we do clinical quality work on a tech timeline, and so far across the 40 or so pre-competitive collaborations we've run, we've been able to hold ourselves to that, believe it or not. So 9-month project, 2 to 4 hours per month across your team, and then there is also a financial contribution generally that we ask for because this is industry funded work. And so we have a rate card that outlines a one-time fee that will really depend on your organization type, size, amount of revenue, that kind of thing. And so I'm happy to provide additional information just kind of on what that would look like depending on what kind of organization. But the whole goal of it is, right, if you're like a large, huge pharma company or a huge tech company, like the Googles of the world are not going to be paying the same price as like a seed funded startup or something of that nature. And so that's our goal, is to make sure that we do have a diverse group of experts that are around the table for this particular project. So again, if you would like more information, please feel free to fill out the interest form or to shoot me an email. I'd be happy to share that information with you.
Thank you so much. And also just for everyone to check out the work that Dime is up to. It's really incredible. Any other questions? Okay, Olivia, back to you.
Sounds good. I think we'll move right on into our federal updates. We have one quick one, and then we'll be passing it off to Jen DeAngelis to dive a little bit deeper. But we just wanted to make sure that everyone is aware that the HTI-2 and HTI-3 final rules were released in December. HTI-2 really focuses on some updates around the TEFCA manner exception related to information blocking, and also has some provisions to improve transparency, really around the QHIOs, the QHINs for TEFCA, to strengthen reliability, privacy, security, and trust. HTA3 also revises the privacy exception and infeasibility exception for information blocking, and it does establish a new exception for protecting access to care in relation to improving more privacy protections for reproductive health data and not having this count as information blocking. But I'll make sure I put both of these rules in the chat so people can take a closer look. And I think just to keep us good on time today, let's move forward. And I want to hand it over to Jen DeAngelis, who is the Director of Federal Policy and Advocacy with Blue Shield of California. She works for them in Washington, D.C., and has a lot of great updates to share with us in regards to 2024 end-of-year updates, really focusing on HIPAA cybersecurity. There's some new action coming out about like what CARES 2.1 could look like. And I will let you go, Jen. Thank you for joining us today.
No, thanks so much. I appreciate the opportunity. Hi, everyone. As Olivia said, Jen DeAngelis from Blue Shield of California. I'm on the federal government affairs team here. Definitely at the end of the year, I would say there was a bit of like a health IT, broad umbrella health IT dump or throwing over the fence, out of their inbox and out into the world. So it's a little bit of a scattershot as I was putting this together and thinking about like what is the outlook for these various initiatives heading into a new administration and a new Congress, a change of leadership. My reflection was that, as you'll see, a lot of my outlook is uncertain. And I think that is just the nature of being in this transition period. While we have a reference point for the Trump administration on IT policy to some extent, given kind of his last go around, I think it's hard to handicap at this point IT related initiatives that were began under the Biden administration and how they will fare under the Trump administration. And I think we're just going to be in for some fits and starts as they staff up and they kind of wrap their hands around, what's pending from the Biden administration that they will want to either kind of review, modify, or potentially not move forward with. So I present all of this with the caveat that we're in this interesting time, transition time. There could be a lot of shifting around what these items look like in the next year or two. But I think still helpful to give you the update on, what was topical at the end of the year and Health IT beyond the HCI rules. So I'll get into it. Next slide. So first, we'd been waiting for this where Congresswoman DeGette and Congressman Bucshon, a bipartisan duo, earlier this year had submitted, published a request for information for stakeholder input on what a Cures 2.1 would look like, because Cures 2.0, while they did kind of put together the contours of legislative proposals, it was never actually signed into law as an official package, although some policies did move forward in other packages. So they're calling this 2.1 as a reflection of like, we're still in the 2 mode, but it's the next iteration of the 2. If folks will recall, the original 21st Century Cures Act was passed in 2016, and it really set up kind of the infrastructure that we're living with today, right? TEFCA, the Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement. It had a lot of new certification requirements for electronic health records, including requirements around incorporating application programming interfaces. It also created the rules around information blocking and kind of set up the administration to promulgate the information blocking regulations. So it did the first iteration of Cures in 2016 did have a significant impact on health IT policy. And we've been waiting to see whether in the 2.1 version, if they were going to kind of continue on that same tack. So in the white paper, which is pretty high level, to be honest, it's I think their synopsis of the stakeholder responses they received, I think areas where they think there could be some bipartisan interest or consensus, but not necessarily like, this is our blueprint, like these are the things that we are affirmatively doing. And I will also note, which I'll note on the next slide, but in terms of like the outlook, Congressman Bucshon retired at the end of the year. So that also creates, again, uncertainty. That's my theme of the day. Around kind of what happens next. Because I think, my experience with Congresswoman DeGette's staff and herself is that she's dogged. She has been successful on these efforts previously. And so I think she will find a new Republican dancing partner, but I don't think there are many members who like to jump into something that's already been baked, right? Like they like to put their own fingerprints on it. So that's going to be part of the process of figuring out where this heads, is who her Republican counterpart will be on this effort in 2025 and 2026. So the white paper itself, I mean, Cures is really about kind of driving clinical innovation, cures, if you will, to patients, as well as kind of investing in health research, a lot of kind of FDA related drug development, clinical trial type of spaces. But again, the 2016 version did have a health IT title. And so we were really pleased to see that the white paper that was released did have a section titled Information Sharing and Evidence Gathering. And they had like an interesting part of the preamble. Let me see if I have it up. I'm going to paraphrase, but basically noting that, the original cures envisioned an ecosystem where individuals' health data would be available in a single longitudinal format that was easy to understand, secure, and now I'm quoting, and may be updated automatically and requires no special effort on the part of the user. And so they further say that we've made some progress, but certainly the state of the ecosystem today has not met that goal. And we're still seeing kind of violations around information blocking. So more work is to be done. So we were happy to see the acknowledgement that there's ample opportunity to conduct some oversight, to think about what kind of the next steps are and policy are on the federal level for health IT. So I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty details here, but I did include some of the kind of groupings of topics within the health IT space. You can see that they talked a bit about kind of the challenges of patient matching, expanding kind of the types of data that can be incorporated into electronic health records from more kind of remote patient devices, kind of other technologies that sometimes sit outside of the traditional healthcare system, as well as kind of improving processes and oversight around the TEFCA framework. And I think, so that's all helpful to see. They also talk a lot about kind of the intersection between the data that the healthcare system produces and how that supports drug development, evidence generation for clinical trials, all these things, more kind of in the drug development space. So you'll see here the secondary clinical use bucket, really around how can we be leveraging EHRs for real world evidence generation and for research. There's also this kind of interesting piece about, can we create a kind of national repository, a data utility that could be sort of like disease agnostic data registry. And they envision a number of potential uses for such a data utility. Next slide. And then I would just note, because I think this is something that always comes up, is who was left out, right? Who was left out of the meaningful use incentives, and how can we be continuing to support small rural providers, behavioral health community, like long-term care community, folks who didn't have access to those funding streams a while back. So interestingly, this white paper does not speak to funding, but you'll see here that they're kind of talking about how can we change the terms of certain existing funding streams to make it easier for, grantees to leverage these loan programs and other grant funding to support purchases and upgrades of certified electronic health record technology. So I kind of covered some of this outlook a bit around kind of Bhushan's retirement. I think it's easy to see that in certainly the near term of 2025 and potentially into 2026, that a broader kind of cures legislative effort is going to be top of the agenda for the Republican caucus. I think that DeGette, I'm sure, will push to have a hearing. So I think we could see a few small action items next year, but really I'm kind of honestly thinking it's going to be until the midterm and maybe into 2027 before we'll see some real traction, which in some respects is good because that gives a long window for folks to weigh in. And
So Jen, when you said next year, you meant truly next year, 2026.
Yeah.
I'm kind of hacking myself saying this year, next year. So you're on top of it.
True. Yeah, I think, you're right. I'm sorry. We're in next year. We are in 2025. Yes. Thank you.
So you're thinking there will be some action potentially this year in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, I could see them maybe later in the year holding a hearing on related topics. But I don't think there's just going to be a lot of movement on legislation out of Energy and Commerce Committee on this issue. But the one thing that my plug for folks, they are accepting input on an ongoing basis. So this white paper is in some respects a beginning. And my perspective as I was on the Hill during the 21st Century Cures drafting in 2026, and just some perspective that the wheelhouse of these House staffers, especially to get, they're really more in the drug development, innovation in the drug space, and kind of Medicare coverage policies. That's their wheelhouse. The Health IT title was largely drafted in the Senate by the Help Committee. So I think that, like, to me, what that means is that I'm really pleased that they included this Health IT section in the white paper, but given that it's not their wheelhouse, I think it's really important for folks, if you're interested in this space and want to weigh in, and encourage them to continue to keep Health IT in scope in this project. I just don't think it's like their natural wheelhouse. So that's my plug. Certainly, I think Blue Shield will be continuing to weigh in, and we'll be looking for partners to do so as well, though haven't quite firmed up what that looks like just yet. But I think we have a long road ahead of us on this. But again, it's just a space to watch over the course of this year and next.
Well, it occurs to me that we were in DC for the Civitas on, Capitol Day. So potentially we can get our act together on this and be able to make sure that we can give some really good feedback while we're visiting again. And if you all are out there and want to join us, I'm sure Civitas would love to be able to, extend the invitation when they put that out there. Stephanie, have we seen that invitation yet?
I have not seen anything.
But that seems to be a milestone where
Yeah.
there's a good opportunity for us to be able to lean in on this. And Jen, how exciting. I know you have more here, but it's so great to have you as part of this. Thank you so much for your expertise and be able to distilling this for us to be able to ingest and to be able to think about next steps.
Yeah. And I will say, obviously, I didn't cover the full scope of this white paper here. I just kind of looked at the Health IT stuff. And there are, of course, interesting overlays on in the other spaces they covered, because, everything is, driven by data, right? So there
Right.
are some interesting intersections across the white paper, but just to note that this was the kind of IT focused space.
So great.
Next slide. What do I have up next? Oh, AI. Why not? So again, throwing stuff out of like over the fence, the House Bipartisan Task Force on Artificial Intelligence, they released their final report. I will note that California was well represented on this task force. Not only were the bipartisan co-leads California members, but like down the list of, I think there were 12 members from Republicans, 12 Democrats in it. There were a ton of, on Republican and Democratic side, ton of California members in the mix here. So just noting that it's an interesting group. And this was, in some respects, I think, like the House is like, we don't want to be left out of the conversation because the Senate earlier in the year had done a series of briefings for the full caucus and released its own roadmap earlier in the year. And so the House was like, oh, us too. Thank you very much. And so got themselves together and so then released this report, again, like a high level report. It's more suggestive than anything. I mean, they're sort of calling it a roadmap, but I think it's even more higher level than that. I think it's like, these are these are issues that we see. We're kind of issue spotting across different sectors. I mean, healthcare is just one narrow portion of this report. And just to come up with like, what do we see out in the landscape? And here are some like potential areas and policy ideas that we could be thinking about moving forward. Again, like not going to get into too many of the details. The healthcare recommendations, very high level. You see here the first one, like ensure AI and healthcare is safe, transparent, effective. Yes, great. What does that mean? So, I mean, I think they did note here kind of monitoring the use of predictive technologies to approve, deny care and coverage, which has been a really hot topic on the Hill the last year or two. So I think no surprises that that was included as a potential concern area. Next. Again, I mean, I think all of this is pretty straightforward. So I'll just go to the outlook. So what I think is interesting here, Congress, I mean, many members have made it pretty clear that they're not interested in, on the Republican side, in particular in the House. There's a lack of appetite to do to pass legislation that sets up a new regulatory framework for AI. I think if they do anything, they're going to look for much smaller bites of the apple. And I think the places that might be kind of most in scope for them are like in the kind of national security defense application space, as well as kind of the research kind of funding at NIH and NIST and other entities, to not lose our competitive edge in the world on AI technology. You know, we saw that President Trump named a AI and cryptocurrency czar from, he's a Silicon Valley tech guy, VC, David Sachs. So I think that's a sign that obviously there's going to be a lot more of a kind of industry-led approach. I think a deregulatory approach, kind of hands-off from the Trump administration. We've heard that they may even repeal the executive order that the Biden administration issued in October of 2023 on AI. So I think we're in for kind of a new regime where it's going to be more hands-off, and Congress isn't likely to advance significant legislation in this space either. What is most interesting to me is what this all means for the reconfigured Assistant Secretary, ASTP, Technology Policy, and ONC, the new ONC, because they specifically reorganized, I think, kind of based on the executive order to take us to be kind of the leading office within the Department of HHS to lead the kind of AI policy, internal, external developments of that agency. Insofar like creating and like chief AI officer's role within ONC. And so, given that there's an AI czar, given that, I think we're taking a more hands-off approach, I think a space to watch is like what happens with ONC. Sorry, I can't leave ONC.
ASTP, I think. It rolls off
ASTP,
the
I can
tongue.
do it. I can do it. It's just hard.
I think it's incredible how quickly that acronym has really stuck. And I'm in meetings all the time where I hear it and I'm like, wait, who? But I think
I know.
it's the
We're
old
switched.
right.
ASTP. I got it. So yeah, I think that's like what will be an interesting space to watch. Like, do they actually name a chief AI officer? Do they reorganize or unorganize, right? Because I think there were some concerns in Congress about that reorganization effort and kind of what the implications were. So just some food for thought there. And now I know I'm over time, so I'll be quick on the next one.
And I'll just share too that we heard officially that Mickey is stepping down. So for those of you who haven't heard, he is it effective, Jen, now? Or do we know the effective date when he's leaving?
Yeah, I don't know. I should know that. I don't know.
21st?
I mean, at any rate, on January 20th.
We're losing him, which is really unfortunate.
Sad. Well, it'll be interesting to see what his next steps are too.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So importantly, also between kind of the holiday and the new year, HHS Office of Civil Rights released a proposed rule updating the HIPAA security rule. This was the first time the HIPAA security rule has been attempted, at least right now it's just proposals, to be updated since 2013. And I will just note that like this is a pretty big role. There's a lot to unpack here. When I saw it was only about 400 pages, I was like, oh, they light touch, because usually there are thousands of pages. But no, there's a ton to unpack, and I have not yet unpacked all of it. But basically, I mean, they spent a lot of the rule kind of making justifications for why they're doing what they're doing. But, we all know that the kind of incidence of breaches and cyber attacks has grown astronomically in the last kind of 5 years, and that kind of the adoption of security measures is not as robust as it needs to be. And so I think there is, we've seen, I know you all have been tracking 2 bipartisan bills that were introduced in the Senate on cybersecurity. So there is bipartisan interest in this topic and in raising the bar in the healthcare industry on adoption of cybersecurity protocols. But it will be interesting to see, right? So this is proposed by the Biden administration. It will transition over to the Trump administration, and I will be very interested to see kind of how they navigate the next steps on this, because it's not a light touch, and it would impose pretty significant costs on HIPAA regulated entities, which is huge, right? It's like over 800,000 entities between health plans, providers, clearinghouses, and all of their business associates, right? And the business associates subcontractees, right? It's an extensive touch. So just wanted to note that. On to the next. I just picked, I mean, there's so much in this rule. I picked just a couple of items here for you all to kind of mull over. But, overall, like OCR, there was no kind of HIPAA security rule standard that was not touched in this rule. And then they added new kind of standards and requirements on top of the existing ones. So everything is being kind of further specified, and a lot more kind of detail in what OCR means by taking, a risk analysis, by having contingency plans, kind of new requirements around asset inventories, network maps. On the next slide, they're going to require like electronic PHI to be encrypted, requiring multi-factor authentication. So really, like, being clear that the HIPAA security rule, this is not optional, this is mandatory, and we are going to further delineate kind of what we expect, and that we expect this to be an ongoing process. You don't just kind of set your security protocol and then leave it. It needs to be reviewed and assessed on an ongoing basis. So there's a lot of new timelines, a lot of new documentation requirements. It's a lift. So I think, as you'll see here, by OCR's own estimates, the first year compliance costs could be up to $9 billion, which is a pretty penny. And then the ongoing costs around $6 billion a year. So I think that's going to give some people some pause, I think, in the Trump administration. Although there are provisions in here, multi-factor authentication, encryption, that the Senate bills also touched on. So there's going to be fans of some of these proposals. So I could see this being one where the Trump administration kind of reviews and picks and chooses its adventure. Maybe, we get half a loaf here, and they kind of identify kind of the top tier priorities and kind of to ratchet down those kind of burden and cost estimates. So, comments are due on March 7th. So we have some time here to get through the rule. But
Jen, maybe we can have a meeting that we dedicate to, not full meeting dedicated, but have a few of you that are experts to come in and talk about our response once we have some time to digest it before the 7th, which is soon, I know, but it would be great if we could lean on you and others.
yeah. And I will say to the question in the chat here, I mean, this is really focused on security, not as much on kind of the portability of data, other than there are requirements around being able to, back up your data, and if in an event of a critical event, kind of restore access to critical systems within 72 hours. So they're instituting kind of new requirements, but I don't think the intent here certainly is to impede kind of access and exchange of data. I do think that it will be, I haven't talked to our business yet to see some of this mapping and kind of tracking your business associate kind of protocol, sort of like, and some requirements that have to flow through contracts, kind of what that might do in terms of having a chilling effect on some of those relationships. I don't have a good read on that just yet, but it certainly isn't intended to impact portability. I don't know if it particularly reinforces it either.
If I can at least, again, I haven't digested it, but there's potentially a door open though for us to be able to provide new comments that can emphasize the portability. And Seth, I 100% agree of the need to be able to reinforce not only portability, but interpretation and being able to stand behind organizations that are sharing data. Yes, I think you were typing at the same time. So let's, Jen, I think we do need to move on to get through the rest of our agenda, but thank you so much. And again, you are such an expert here. We're so glad for you to be able to zoom in from DC, literally. And we will be working with you because I do think we should take the opportunity to get some comments in, both for 2.1 and this as well.
Great. Well, thanks for having me, and I look forward to the rest of the agenda.
Thank you.
All right, and I think I'll be hopping back in here for a few California data exchange updates. A few of these are responses that we have submitted over the last month. So I think we might, just for time's sake, have to move through those pretty quickly, but encourage people to go back in and refer to the slides to see what we shared. The most important one, though, is that the CDII centralized roster service RFI is due tomorrow. And we held a listening session on Monday. So thank you, everyone who was able to attend. I think we had around 20 folks, which was really great to see. And we had a great conversation around the importance of a centralized roster service, and all agreed that it is something that will be vital and very necessary for DXF participants to be able to route ADTs, request ADTs, and also to just improve querying of networks. A key point that we spoke about is that the roster service it can't be static, or the value won't be there. We believe if it is just something where organizations are uploading rosters, it puts a lot of burden back on providers. So we wanted to explore this concept of having a more dynamic roster system or roster service that gets augmented with other sources of data. And one other point to that came up during our listening session is that this really is a collective asset, both for the state agencies, and also private organizations. So we should try to leverage where possible existing infrastructure, patient matching infrastructure that's maintained by the state. For example, this might be like our all payer claims database. Another question for the RFI is around patient matching capabilities, which we do agree this must be included. We feel strongly that there is utility and merit in having a statewide person index that can serve as this record locator service, and also be leveraged to support consent management as this is developed more in the future. At this time, we do think that the index could build upon medical record numbers and be associated back with providers and health plans, but we are very interested if others have other ideas. I think another source of data that was identified during the listening session is managed care plan data, and the data they have on who their members are assigned to, whether that's their clinic or their primary care physician, could be another great data source to augment the system. We also want to include in our response that it is important for the centralized roster service to be a scalable reference model and not just a pilot. We do want to see a full product and have something that, maybe it starts small, but it can definitely scale up, build big, and be used for other use cases in the future. And then final 2 points here that we plan on highlighting in our response is that it is important that we continue to advance DXF governance, which will support governance for the roster service. But as a whole, we do need to continue to invest in DXF governance, as well as investing in specific governance for the roster service and an overall digital identity strategy. And finally, we need to make sure that privacy and security is really at the forefront and supported by strong governance. But Timmy, I think we have a minute or two if there's anything you want to discuss with the coalition or Anything you want to add?
Well, I just thank everybody for attending the listening session in such, small condensed time frame for us to be able to get this over the finish line. And what I think I was really struck with, and I go back to this idea of dynamic building of a roster that's more dynamic, and yet we heard from almost every QHIO that attended, which was I think 4 or 5, that the rosters that they receive are manual, well, not manual, I mean electronic, but that they are updated either weekly or monthly from providers, and that they are really restricting the response or alerts to those rosters, which just seems really to me archaic, for lack of better words, but I think it's reflects real world today. So where and how can we kind of move past where we are today? And I always think of leapfrogging or incremental, but at least getting to a point where this type of service is useful on day one. So there's needs to be a lot be thought through on it, but I really appreciate everybody's input and response. I think we also, Olivia, are inserting, or we did in our letter, referencing the work that we're doing here at Connecting for Better Health, and looking to our sandbox, and also the use case development, that we potentially use the sandbox and use case development as a way to model different approaches for a identity management and RLS, and different approaches that might stick based on what's available today. So I think that's also just another little bullet that we can add. So please
Great
look
point.
at it. It's due tomorrow, correct?
Due tomorrow.
Very real time. I think we have can we put our link to the response in the chat if we haven't already? I don't see it. And then if you all have any comments, please take a quick review of it today, multitask in your meetings today. And if you have anything that you would like for us to amend or edit, just let us know.
I'll pop in our digital identities letter, which is what we're really going to be building our response around.
Thank you.
All right, and just to keep us moving forward, quick FYI, which maybe we'll have time to discuss a little bit more in detail at our next meeting, but we want to make sure that folks are aware of the DHCS closed loop referral guidance that was released, I believe, right before the end of the year as well. This really details the requirements for managed care plans and how they need to collect data and track referrals. And this is impacting referrals for both enhanced care management and community supports, not referrals outside of this. These requirements are going to go into effect for the managed care plans July 1st. So a lot to come over the next 6 months or so as we adjust data that's getting reported and develop new processes to make sure that we are closing the loop here. And I do want to note from the draft guidance that was released, there were two, what I thought, or I would say the biggest update there is that there is a requirement for the managed care plans to really close the loop with the referring entity, which we are very happy to see that update in there. And I think I just dropped that link in the chat.
Came out really loud and clear in our review and our comments back to DHCS. So it's really great that we saw that and that they were listening.
All right, and I think, Maya, I'll hand this one over to you, but I think we are running short on time, so we'll run through this quick and try to make sure to leave time for our ledge tracking.
Yeah, thanks, Olivia. So in addition to the CDII RFI listening session, we also hosted it in, we also mentioned the DSAG, the Data Sharing Authorization Guidance Toolkits that DHCS has put together. On a more general note, we asked for more clarification around decision points in the toolkit to which actors are actually subject to HIPAA. And then we also, on a high level, asked for a greater crosswalk and integration of the SHIG and referenced our consent white paper that we created back in 2023, I believe, for guidance on federal and state laws that impact a diverse number of entities. In terms of the Medi-Cal toolkit, we wanted to expand the focus to people that are at risk for homelessness, not just unhoused individuals, increase the connectivity between HMIS and QHIOs under the DXF, and also have multiple front doors for referrals going into housing rather than just the MCPs like it was in the toolkit. And then for reentry, we asked for greater clarification on how subcontractors for care are usually how subcontractors are governed under HIPAA in terms of the reentry, and then also to take into consideration DOJ privacy and security requirements, and then adding a youth and guardian scenario, as well as clarifying more of the behavioral health links that they were talking about in the scenarios.
And I just want to also highlight that 2 of our use cases that one that we completed in 2024 and one that we're completing right now in the sandbox. One was around referrals for somebody who's homeless. So it's a fantastic use case and example that we are going to highlight. And then the other, the reentry initiative work that we're doing in Alameda right now centers around 2 individuals, one who is released within jail and then released almost the same day. And then another individual who's arrested in one county and then who lives in another county. So that was a whole other ball of wax. But it's so fantastic that we were a little bit ahead of this and that we can really relay back to DHCS some real world examples. So thank you all for participating in that work.
Definitely.
I'll also just quick note, I heard that there might have been an extension for the toolkit responses. We got ours in yesterday, but would recommend people take a look and consider responding as well if that did get extended. But sorry, we can continue on.
Yeah, we just wanted to follow up on our December meeting. We did end up submitting comments to the HHS administration for children and families for their RFI to look for more information on interoperability standards and tools that are currently being used between Health and Human Services. One of our big callouts was for a more clear interoperability standards that can guide exchange. And we can really see that in our sandbox. And that's a key aspect of why we created it, to serve as this policy guiding tool for organizations to test and validate their data sharing strategies to inform their peers, intermediaries, policymakers, and regulators as they are developing these standards. So you can access the response on our website, and I think Olivia will also add it in the chat.
And do we have Civitas's response too on this? Did we receive theirs?
We did not see it, so I'm not sure if they ended up responding. I have a feeling they did, but I didn't see it come through via email.
Let's follow up on that, and we can distribute that through this group as well. And if anybody else has their responses, I'm sure that folks would be interested in seeing it. So please share it with us and we can distribute it. And Mary Sarah, I see you on. Thank you for being one of those early hands up and letting us know that that was something that was out there that needed response. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Moving along really quickly, we are starting our 2025 legislation tracking for California. Just a quick call out, tomorrow is the last day that the governor's budget can be is going to be submitted. So at the next meeting, we'll have a couple of slides summarizing what the budget bill entails. And then February 21st is the last day for any new bills to be introduced. And then based on what has been submitted so far to the legislature, C4BH will keep tabs on any relevant legislation for our coalition and provide updates as they come. Here is our preliminary list. And since we don't have as much time today, I encourage you to, we'll send out the slides later and read through all the legislation that we have deemed interesting. And as always, please let us know if you have any other legislation that you would like us to track, and we will continue to monitor any incoming legislation. And I think I'm gonna move it to Timmy to talk about our March events.
If you haven't already, please mark your calendars, and you should have received an invitation yesterday for registering for our dinner and also the summit, which is on the next slide. But well, yeah, go back. I'll talk about the 19th first. So our day at the Capitol, and I think we could put it in the chat. You can RSVP for our day at the Capitol. Many of you joined us. We hope to double our size for this year. It's a day where we fan out across our representatives and go in groups to talk about why we think the data exchange framework and other key legislation is so important for us to get over the finish line this year. In addition, we're going to be meeting with our regulators too. So that's a nice addition to the work that we are planning, or agenda that we're planning. And that evening, we are having our first annual dinner. And I know I've talked about it before, but now you have the ability and a link to be able to sign up. Either consider sponsoring a table or grab a seat for yourself. We cannot wait to be able to celebrate the work that we've been doing together with you. And then the next day, and again, this is where you can now register, is to register for the summit. It's on March 20th. It's a day in Sacramento. CDII is hosting. This is a free summit, and all of you are invited. Grab a ticket, and we are limited in space. So we'll do this the same that we did last year, where we will be looking at making sure that we're equitable in the attendance, and that if there is more than a number of you from one organization, we may have to limit some space. But get in early and go grab your ticket, and there's your registration. We can't wait to be able to share the agenda with you. We should be able to share that shortly. I think we're at time. Is there? Oh, we have another slide.
Yeah, if we could quick run through just a couple upcoming events. Just want to let people know we are going to have office hours later in January. They'll take place Monday, January 27th. We're also looking forward to being at the ITEP conference in early February, so hope to see a lot of you guys there.
Olivia,
And
this
we
is
also want
January 28th. Is it the 27th or 28th?
Oh gosh, 27th. So we'll make sure we update that in the slide, and I'll put the registration link in the chat real quick.
Okay, thank you.
So yes, 27th, we are excited to see people at ITEP. And we also just want to bring to people's attention, Stephanie put it in the chat earlier, but DHCS is hosting a all-comer webinar on the closed loop referral guidance on February 6th. So recommend checking that out as well.
And let us know if you're going to be at VIVE. A group of us will be at VIVE. I think CDII is presenting at VIVE. So let us know if you'll be there, and we will find a meeting spot for us. Super. Any other comments or contributions? All right. Well, we're at the top of the hour. It was so great seeing everybody. Again, our hearts are breaking for our colleagues in the Los Angeles area. And yeah, we're here for you. Thank you.
Thank you all.